I am Nyla Smith with The Quintessential Gentleman. And today we're talking with award-winning director, producer, and writer, Pete Chatmon, who's worked on some of our favorite shows as director, producer, all of the things, including Grey's Anatomy, Blackish, and one of my personal favorites, Insecure.
Aha.
And, yes, it's near and dear to my heart. So we'll be discussing your background and journey as a director and producer, your thoughts on diversity and representation in the entertainment industry, and of course, your latest project, Reasonable Doubt, which is now streaming on Hulu. I believe it started this week. And it stars, I apologize in advance, Emayatsi Corignaldi.
Emayatsi Corignaldi, yep.
Oh, perfect, okay. McKinley Freeman, Michael Ealy, and Sean Patrick Thomas, and is also executive produced by actor, producer, and director, Kerry Washington. So
all your information is correct.
Awesome, love it, love it. Thank you so much again for taking the time to talk with us. And
My
again,
pleasure.
I wanted to give you a personal thank you for season 3, episode 2 of Insecure. I am Team Issa Daniel, and I thought that was a beautiful episode. And that was pretty much all we got. So
hey, that was great because there was so much like backstory to that relationship and so much that we could kind of take from ourselves and put onto those characters. And it was a nice window into maybe what could have been, you know?
Yes. Thank you. I'm glad you said it. Thank you. So just jumping into your background, can you tell us a little bit more about that and just essentially how you got into directing?
So, you know, I always say it sounds like I'm about to sit you down by the fireplace, but I'm not. But I picked up a film camera in 11th grade in high school. My high school had a film program, which was one class with one camera, but it was a program. And it was a Super 8 camera. So it was, you know, the kind of things that people's parents were making films on in the 60s and the 50s, 70s, whatever. And, you know, having an opportunity to pick up the camera, I really found that I understood the film language kind of instinctively. And I have a book where I talk about this. The book's called Transitions, A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook. And I talk about this story where like I made a short film, silent film. We developed the film ourselves. And then I showed it in class and the teacher was like, oh, that was a really good choice you made to condense time, because I just felt like, well, nobody wants to see this woman walk down 3 flights of stairs and go through 4 doors. I'm going to have her come down, you know, get off the train, go through 1 door, and then, you know, tilt down from the payphone to her as she walks up, because that's what's important. And that little bit of acknowledgement kind of made me say, okay, you know, maybe I got something. And you know, I was also very heavily influenced by Spike Lee. As a man of a certain age, you know, it's impossible not to be.
Right there with
you. You know, and as I learned from my high school teacher who had gone to NYU that Spike had gone there, Scorsese had gone there, Oliver Stone, I was like, well, clearly that's where you go. And so I was very fortunate to get in. I only applied to NYU Film School.
Is the only school you applied to?
The only one I applied to. I've always been very much like this. You know, I've always been like, I will do the work. I will do all I can to prepare myself. And I won't say that I trust the universe, because things don't always work out as we wish, but I do believe in just doing everything I can to go after something very single-mindedly. And so, yeah, I went to NYU. My focus was to direct. I started writing to have things to direct. I started producing because I needed to have somebody coordinate what I wrote to direct. And I would act in those things because the good producer in me knew that would save money. And it all culminated with a thesis film at NYU that went to Sundance, starring Kerry Washington. So it's a bit of a, you know, 23 year full circle coming back to this moment of reasonable doubt.
Wow. I love how you tied that up. because,
Mm.
and I that actually resonated with me because I only applied to one college as
Yeah.
well. So it was like, yeah. So
What's the
speaking of
point? Who's gonna pay for all these fees, all these apps? Man, it ain't free.
why, especially when you
Right.
know, there's something to
Right.
be said about knowing. So speaking of reasonable doubt, can you tell us a little bit more about the premise? And I'll let
Yeah.
you speak to it. So,
So it stars Emayatsi Cornaldi, as we mentioned, and it follows the story of Jack Stewart, who might be an attorney whose actions you question until you need her to defend you. And
yes.
so we're watching her as she deals with the biggest case of her life. It starts off as an NDA and turns into a sexual assault and turns into a murder. And at the same time, she's navigating the realities of being a Black woman in today's world. She's got she's in a trial separation with her husband. She is someone that she knows from her past, comes out of prison and kind of inserts himself back into her life. And she's left to kind of juggle all of these various things, plus the feelings and emotions of her two kids who are dealing with the separation. And it's really just a buffet of the Black female experience that Emayatsi really gets to explore in these scripts that are, overseen by Ramla Muhammad, who's the showrunner.
Okay. So, I mean, I feel like you gave some of the answers to my next question, but I was going to ask what specifically attracted you to the project, particularly
Yeah.
as a producer or co-producer, rather.
Yeah. So for me, I'm a person who, I did my first episode of TV in 2017. First episode I ever did was Grownish, but the first episode I ever got hired for was Blackish. But the calendars kind of flipped. And, it's now, 5 years later, over 50 episodes later, and I've kind of hopped around from a variety of shows to a variety of shows, both half-hour comedy and one-hour drama. And I love being able to hop in and out of different worlds and stories. But as an independent filmmaker and somebody who came up really designing worlds and being involved in a little bit more involved in how what you see on the screen got there, I was very attracted to the opportunity to work with such creative people in that capacity, to help kind of take the baton from Kerry Washington and her pilot and kind of communicate that vision to the directors across the next 8 episodes, 2 of which I did, I just responded to the script in the sense of like, it's Black folks doing real Black things, and there's a lens being put on the experience that doesn't often happen because we're too often put in the world of a secondary character. And so a lot of times, it's like the world is kind of made to seem full by having diversity in the background of the canvas, but we don't really dive into those people's lives and get to learn like their hopes, their dreams, their troubles, their conflicts. And this show really dove into that head first.
So I feel like you see my questions, right? Because my next question is around, as you mentioned, she's very complicated, and I saw that for myself looking at the first 2 episodes on Tuesday. There are a lot of layers to her. For you, what was, as a male director, what was important? Because Kerry directed the first episode, as you said.
Right.
So just you bringing a different perspective to her, to Jax as a lead character, what was important? What were you really intentional about conveying?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I feel like, in the beginning of a show, there's so much setup, right? Like even if you take even a feature film, like your first act is like, I'm making this number up, but it's like 55% of your story. You know what I mean? In the first third, because we have to give you enough to hang your hat on, to be interested. You need questions that need to be resolved, and you need people whom you're going to root for or root against.
Right.
And of course, those things will pivot as you have shapeshifters and people who are revealed to be not whom they present themselves to be.
Mhm.
And so I think in the first in episode 2, we're very much in the, you know, we're kind of like doing an alley-oop for, episodes 4 through 9.
Yeah.
So my thing is I come in and I really just am keeping an eye on what's happening for the audience. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there's a buddy of mine, Carl Seaton, says that, he's the first audience member as the director. And what's interesting about that is, or to take it to the next kind of reasonable conclusion, it's like, but we're audience members who have an ability to protect and preserve and enhance what the audience gets, right? So what's interesting to me is just being able to kind of watch Emma Yahtzee, learn how she's approaching the role, because as much as I'm prepping and designing the look and feel of an episode, the actors are designing the look and feel of the character. So I'm trying to get in sync with what she's doing. And
Mhm. Right.
if there's anything that I might have what if we try this, or what do you think about that? That's where I kind of come in to keep it honest. And, maybe I think in an interesting way, there's a really cool dynamic on something like this where you've got there's such a clarity in the female voice that sometimes it's like, well, maybe I can check for a potential blind spot for the male voice. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's what's really cool and what's really smart about how everything was staffed, from the writer's room to the directors that came on board.
So it's interesting you mentioned the blind spots with the male voice because
Mhm.
I'm curious as to the three. Well, there are three key male characters on the show.
Mhm.
McKinley Freeman, he plays Lewis.
Yes.
Michael Ealy plays, is it Damon?
Damon. Yeah.
Damon, and then Sean Patrick Thomas. And I don't know. He's actually one of my favorite characters, and I forget
Yeah.
his name right now, but he's the
Braden Miller.
Braden Miller. Okay, thank you. So they're all super different, just different personalities. They look, everything about them is different. And she has
Right.
three very different relationships and interactions with all of them, which
Right.
that was extremely intriguing for me. That's I think the alley oop that you're
Yeah.
kind of referring
Right.
to.
You're like, where is this going to go? Right.
Exactly. So they're the three male characters on the show. So why is it important to show their individual
Mhm.
relationships and perspectives to Jax?
Because you know what, as I think as the entire community, male, female, everything in between, we're just painted into very confining corners
Mhm.
about that say this is who we are. You know what I mean? And I think what you're recognizing in those male characters is the difference, between who we are and also how we present. Because, there's an interesting thing of like, you could wear a suit, but don't get it twisted. You know what I mean? Don't let this suit
Oh,
get
he's a
things
problem.
twisted. You
He
know,
could be a problem.
and at the same time, I could be, whatever. These are kind of quick, easy stereotypes, but I could be dressed on the kind of opposite end of the spectrum, but don't think I can't get professional either, or I don't know how things should roll, right? And so you know, those three characters offer an opportunity to see what those three types of Black people look like and how they feel, and what the various kind of idiosyncrasies are and nuance and levels are for Black men, in the same way that we're exploring that with Jackson and Emma Yahtzee work.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of stepping away from reasonable doubt and stepping into the diversity and representation in entertainment space. So I'm actually just personally just noticing a lot more directors of color. I mean, it's amazing to see. Growing up it was Martin Scorsese,
Right,
Steven
right,
Spielberg. That's who you thought of when you thought of director. And then
right,
Spike Lee came along, which was wonderful, of course.
right.
But just even seeing you now and talking to you, it's like it's amazing in the best way. So what does how do you feel about that? Just kind of
Mm.
just being in your obviously current position.
I think it's amazing. I think it's long overdue. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I think that, I guess I'll maybe answer it from two sides. I think that it's long overdue. Um, there are great stories that have yet to be told. In the world of content now, like they're just constantly trying to find new stories, right? And so it seems like the easiest, the most prevalent thing in the last 5 years or so has been like we just kind of take things from real life and now present the narrative episodic version of these things, right? So like whether it's a true crime thing that's now a mini series or whatever, and that's great. Like we need to find audiences want new things all the time, but there's a great treasure trove of stories that have been told because we haven't seen so many genres through the eyes of fully realized Black characters. So what does that heist film look like when it's a fully realized Black character doing it for a particular reason that's particular to their unique experience, right?
Mhm.
Or a love story or a drama. So there's a lot of great mining to be done there. And then on the flip side, and so I'm ecstatic about that. On
Yeah.
the flip side, if you get down to the numbers of it all,
Mhm.
you know, what I hope folks who are behind the desks of Hollywood will extract is that, you know, there's a great financial opportunity also in telling our stories and being inclusive of our voices in the stories that are being told to the kind of larger quote unquote market. Because when you look at things like, you know, whether it's some kind of like, this is commercials, but like when you look at some of these commercial fiascos where it's like, yo, who told you to do that commercial and tell that story? Well, if you would have had somebody diverse in the room, they would have been like, and they would have been empowered, because that's the other thing too. You can't just be in the room and be scared to say anything. You have to know that it's a safe environment for you to potentially be checking, or better yet, educating people. And
Mhm.
so many things can be avoided, so many projects can be elevated, and it's just an audience that's waiting to be given something that engages them fully, whether they know it or not.
Okay. Okay. So what for you specifically, what were some challenges or unique challenges that you faced just coming
Mm.
up in the director game?
I mean, it's always the biggest challenge is, money, right? Like, I mean, it's negligible. I can borrow your laptop. I can scrounge up a couple $100 to get the screenwriting software. But then once that thing is done, we're gonna have to shoot it.
Right.
And I'm not painting, and I'm not a poet, so I can't work alone.
Right.
And I just need now to, you know, it's like I have to strike lightning in a bottle, multiple times, because in your first initial projects, you're going to be so new to it that it's just going to be a bunch of friends helping you out.
Hmm.
And your skill level increases, and your what you're trying to say probably gets more difficult, right? And you probably start needing more skilled craftspeople to help you realize your vision. And you can get that free hookup, over the weekend deal a couple times. But at a certain point, you're going to need some type of money to make a project. And that is always the challenge, because um, it's not always a financially viable exercise to make a short film. So as somebody who made a short film that went to Sundance and like 30 festivals around the world, and then, you know, it didn't lead to representation or anything like that, you know, then I raised, you know, $500,000 for my first feature that starred Zoe Saldana and Dorian Missick and Hill Harper. And that was like the first thing I made that could raise, that people could find a return on investment. But, you know, it didn't turn into Blair Witch Project. So, you know, 35 people invest in that. Are they going to do it again? Probably not. And their reasons for having done it might also be connected to the fact that it was your first one and they're really trying to help you kind of get your start. But you can't, it's a hard well to return to. And so my long-winded answer is the biggest challenge is always money. But in, you know, today's world, it's easier to do it because your phone, your iPad, all these things are cameras and you can edit. It's just it's an easier, it's been democratized, but still the challenge will be money. And I think also selling yourself so you can find a way to continuously build a team around your dream.
Okay. So when did you feel like you made it, for lack of a better term, or when did you feel like you achieved a certain level of success that you were really satisfied with and proud of?
You know, that's a loaded question, you know, because I feel like I'm trying not to give you like a book with every answer, but I feel like, you know, you have to redefine your idea of success, right? Because like if you do, because in the beginning, I thought I had been successful because I had gone to Sundance, because I had been sold the idea of that meant I'd done something.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it didn't lead necessarily to an agent or a manager, well, how am I left to position this thing, you know? And so then it kind of became important to me to kind of say, like, look, whether it gets critical or commercial success, like I've got to know whether I achieved what I set out to do or not. And sometimes I may not have achieved it and it did really well, you know, and sometimes I may have achieved it and no festival wanted to take it. And, you know, so I'm constantly trying to judge what I do by intention and by execution. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, for me, I guess the answer would be, I feel the, the thing where I first was like, this is what I intended to do. And I'm mostly looking at my intention when I click play was my short film, Black Card. And that was something I made in 2015. You know, I spent $30,000 of my own money. I was just like, look, I'm doing okay, you know, but I'm not making anything for myself. It's been 7 years since I made a thing with my voice on it. You know, let me see what it looks like with the skills I've developed making things for other people. Let me see what it looks like if I point that toward my own passion. And ironically, you know, that film got picked up by HBO. And that's how I got into 4 different TV directing programs. And that film led me to directing television. And ironically, also, I have a meeting after this for a new show that I can't name, but that film is a very good reference. And if I do get that job, it will probably be a component as to why, because it's so clear, you know, it deals with it's called Black Card. It deals with an alternate universe where there's a shadow organization called the Commission that takes Black people's like literal card that they keep on them at all times, should they do anything that's not Black. And it follows a couple as they're having a very big argument and debate about whether or not they are going to continue to live by these rules or will they be themselves. And the commission is on the tail of one of them for reasons you find out over this 12-minute film, you know. And that was like, I did that and I was like, okay, yeah, I've gotten better, you know, and I felt very proud.
Well, let's hurry up and get you out of here so you can get to your meeting, because we want this to, manifestation and all that. So
I'm good. I'm just tying it together because it's all like
yeah, wow, okay,
it's all
awesome,
linear.
awesome. That sounds interesting, because black card initial. That was my initial thought. It's like maybe it's unrelated, but then when you
Uh,
explained, um, so what are some? You mentioned your book Transitions, which is amazing. Can you talk? You want to talk a little bit more about that, or some additional resources, advice that you'd offer to aspiring Black
yeah.
directors?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking. I feel like, the book is, I wrote the book thinking of myself, you know, and I reiterate that for all artists. Like, I really feel like sometimes we get blinded by the idea of, well, we get blinded by what the industry or the market is showing us or what other people's success may look like. And we try and emulate. And I just feel like you have to be who you are and you have to hone your voice and then rinse, repeat, and do it as often as you can. And Transitions is the book I wish I would have been able to read along the way. So it's like a mixture of self-help and how-to and inspiration. And it kind of fundamentally chronicles my journey from picking up a Super 8 film camera to directing television over gosh, that's like a 30-year period. Oh my God. But each chapter is governed by a keyword or a principle that I took away from that point in my life that is something that can be replicated by anybody. Because you can't say, do X, Y, Z, and then voila, you'll get an episode of TV or a film.
Mhm.
But the kind of principles that are kind of being developed and put into the suitcase I travel with professionally,
Mhm.
um, I feel like they are guarantees to move the needle forward. And so that book came out. It also has 10 snippets of interviews from my podcast, which is called Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon. And so, the whole point of that is, like, I know sometimes people be like, yeah, okay, Pete, you saying all this stuff, but that's cool. And so I've got 10 other directors and they have their stories and they kind of echo the same principle. So
Right.
I've got Rob McElhenney, who created Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Mythic Quest. Um, Keith Powell, who's just done Interview with the Vampire. Millicent Shelton, who's done everything from Blackish to Run the World to she has a new film out with Ludacris and Queen Latifah on Netflix. So, that's kind of my gift back to the younger version of myself, in the hopes that a few more people won't quit before they get there, because it's a long, hard journey. And I think, I don't blame people for um, hanging up their sneakers, after
Yeah.
10 years. But
Wow.
like, I had them sneakers on for 17 years, and I know I could have quit at year 10, and nobody could have said I didn't try,
Yeah.
But I want folks to know, like, this is what it can look like, so they can have an inspiration.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so you touched a little bit about what's potentially next that you can't really talk about,
Mhm.
but what are there any other projects that you can talk about?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can. I'm excited. The next 4 months, I'm about to start on Fatal Attraction. So they're doing a reboot of Fatal Attraction, starring Joshua Jackson, Lizzie Kaplan, and Amanda Peet. Uh, then I'm gonna do the show Minx on HBO Max, um, which is like it's a period piece about a woman who starts a Playgirl-esque magazine. So it deals with a lot of issues that we need to confront as far as women's issues and rights, but it's through a period piece. So it's the entry point is different. Then I'm going to do American Auto, which is an NBC comedy, and then Dead Boy Detectives for HBO Max, which is a new
That last one,
Dead Boy Detectives.
Dead Boy Detectives. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm excited. It's there are some things in development that hopefully we'll get the green light on, and just trying to keep it going and do some writing myself and raise my daughter.
Oh, congratulations. Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Lots of good stuff. Lots of
lots
good
of
stuff.
good stuff.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you have a time. We're coming on 6:30 Eastern time. Do you have a
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
minute?
I'm good for a couple minutes if you got stuff. Yeah.
So, and I think do you have a dream project? You have a lot going on, obviously, but is
Hmm.
there something that I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
talk about that right now or
I do have a dream project. I hesitate to say the premise.
okay.
Um, I will say it's a little bit of Schitt's Creek meets Do the Right Thing. Um, so it's very different. It's a little historical fiction, and it deals with financial literacy in our community in an interesting way, and how we've gotten to where we are right now. Um, but yeah, I'm just, part of me, the long game part of my mind is like, I just know we just keep working, doing more projects. Sometimes timing is the only ingredient, right? Or the main ingredient. Like sometimes something you've been working on for a number of years becomes viable because, the zeitgeist has shifted to be more accommodating to what used to be a more challenging idea. And so I'm going to hope that that's what's happening, coupled with raising my profile through doing more and more shows and working with more and more folks. So that's I still got dreams even while living a dream at the same time.
That's all you can ask for. Um, so what is we like to ask all our guests this last
Sure.
question. What is your definition of a quintessential gentleman?
That's a good one. So my definition of a quintessential gentleman is, and I may, if I can think a little bit, because I like to be sharp, you know what I mean. Um, but my idea of a quintessential gentleman knows who he is and how to move through the world as a good citizen, and aspires to help other folks be the best citizen that they can.
Love that. Love that. That was perfect. That's
All
perfect.
right. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And I don't know if you want to share some of your socials so people can kind of keep up to date with
Oh yeah.
all these exciting projects that you're working on.
Yeah.
So
Nah, thank you. Thank you. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Pete Chatmon, PeteChatmon. I don't tweet that much, but I do hop on IG a lot because it's just the
it's
immediacy of just a
director. Yeah.
photo and a sharing. And I do try and share behind the scenes stuff and stuff like that. And yeah, anything that's happening is gonna be there. It's gonna be there.